Hi, this is Bob Sorrentino from Italian Roots and Genealogy, and I'm here today with Dante Nazzaro, who's probably one of the youngest people I interviewed who's interested in their family heritage. And so we're going to talk a little bit about that, and then also going to get into this great project that he's working on. So welcome, Dante. Thanks for being here.
Thanks for having me. Excited to be here.
My first question is, what got you started in wanting to research the family history and find out where you came from?
Yeah, it kind of goes back to, I guess, my grandfather and my father. So in my family, we have this weird history where my grandfather, when he was a kid, since he's first generation, his parents took him back to Italy once to sort of just see the family. And that was before World War II broke out. And while he was there, so he learned Italian, he saw the town and everything. And while he was there, they had to get out right before World War II. And so when my dad eventually was in his mid-20s, he kept getting interested in all these stories my grandfather was saying, and my great-grandmother as well. And so he decided to go back and sort of, see the cousins that he knew about at the time, but my great-grandmother, his grandmother, really knew and sort of set it up for him. And so eventually for me, that was the one thing he always talked about. So as I was growing up, is sort of a similar thing. I kept hearing all these stories about these cousins in Italy, and I'd wanted to go to Italy. And then on my grandma's side and my mom's side, I heard all these stories. So I just started asking my dad to show me what he had, and then he sort of helped me set up a trip, helped me set up a trip to go see the cousins when I was in Italy studying, and then eventually getting into doing the film. I went back and sort of saw if I could discover anything new that we didn't know. So it just became a normal thing. I just got so interested in knowing who I learned a part of myself knowing my history. So.
Yeah, and that's interesting, and that's the way I feel too. And I think most of us who do that, especially my mother's family is a very big family. There were 9 brothers and sisters, and only 1 or 2 are kind of interested. Sometimes I'll post something out there, and people say, "Oh, that's good to see," or "That's nice," but there's something I think inbred in some of us, whether somebody's calling us from the past or we just have that need to find out where we come from.
Yeah, it's kind of funny. So I have four brothers, 2 sisters in my family. So my parents, I guess they went real traditional. But all my siblings, they have interests, but it's kind of funny how I feel in every family there's the one sibling that gets the bug. And then I remember my dad when I started asking all these questions, it was his whole demeanor changed. He was so happy. He was you have the bug. Hey, thank God. So
I wish I had asked questions earlier. My grandparents were older because my father was the youngest in his family. My mother was the second youngest. So when I was growing up, they already were old. And I think probably with your father, because he's of my generation, and he went back, he talked about Italy a lot more. My grandparents really didn't talk about Italy at all. Very little. A lot of it was centered because they had come to America or made that move. A lot of it was centered about being American, and they didn't talk about the past that much.
So let me ask you a question. Are you first generation or second generation? Or
I'm second. So in my mom's family, her oldest brother and oldest sister were born in Italy.
Okay.
And my uncle John, Uncle Giovanni, he did not come when my grandparents came. Okay. They left him behind. He was about 2 or 3 years old. They left him with his grandparents, and I've heard 2 things. I heard that they were going to send for him, and then I also heard that they were going to go back. They planned to go back. In any event, he wound up turning 18, had to go into the Italian army. World War II broke out, so he did not come to America with his family until he came to Canada in '49, and I think to America in like '54 or something.
Okay.
So they all grew up in Italy. All my cousins, all grew up in Italy.
I have a. Oh, go ahead. Sorry.
My dad's family, his three older siblings were born in Italy,
Okay.
and the youngest daughter and my father were born here.
Okay. Yeah. So my grandfather's cousin, Louisa, she came to America after the war as well, and so I sort of have like that was always an interesting thing because I guess technically they're third cousins to me or something, but it's kind of weird because they're like as old as my grandfather. But they're real nice. They're actually in the film as well. But yeah, my dad, I remember him telling me that like he heard stories from my grandfather when he asked, but also my great grandparents, his grandparents. I think not my great grandfather. My dad always said my great grandfather Alfonso, like never wanted to be Italian after he came to America. But his wife, and my dad's grandma was like had this romantic idea of like her life back in Italy. So as he was a kid growing up, I think he got a lot of like the romantic ideals of like the small town in Italy and like finding new family and everything from her. And eventually I got it from him because he sort of adopted that like romantic idea.
Yeah, that's interesting. So, where are they? Where are they from in Italy?
So my dad's side is mainly in the Campania region in Naples, but it's really from the small town of San Potito Ultra, which is about 30 minutes from Avelino. So I always sort of like point to Avelino because I'm like, oh, like The Sopranos. And then my mom's side is sort of on I forget the name. It's like where the bottom, where Sicily sort of meets the rest of Italy, like in Sicily, that part. I just remember the name. It's kind of confusing because the information on her side of the family is really hazy. So like I get different places sometimes from them, but mainly like in Sicily and also some areas in southern Italy. And they came over around the same time my great-grandparents on my my dad's side came over to America, so I'm third generation.
And so, were they the typical Southern Italian immigrants that basically your farmers or seamstresses or things like that?
Yeah, well, actually, it's kind of funny. So my dad's side, and this kind of like plays a role in the movie a little bit, but my great grandfather, he was sort of a laborer, and then but he married my great grandmother, who was related to who was the first mayor of the town where I'm from in San Potito, with the last name Miranda. So he was a tailor. That the person who was the mayor was a tailor, and then eventually became the mayor. So he ended up marrying her, and then eventually coming to America. Or I think actually they met in America because she had come over since she was like her family was a little bit more well off. She had come over for some reason, and he was over at the same time. And then they met. They were like, "Oh, we're from the same town." They decided, "Let's get married." They went back and they got married as they do, and get married in Italy. And then for my mom's side, it was the same. Like I don't know the specific jobs, but I think farmers and some just laborers, and then I have, I guess, one tailor from my great grandmother's side.
On my mom's side, she's from Torito Bari, so everybody was a farmer. And my great grandfather actually, he owned a cow or two, and he would actually go through the streets, and if you needed milk, he'd stop in front of the door and milk the cow, and
Wow.
That's how you got your milk.
Those are the greatest stories to hear. I can imagine that. I like just being outside my front door and a cow walks by, and then
Yeah, and so my cousins, my first cousins grew up in that house.
Wow.
It was a two-room house. And, my cousin told me the story that one room was my aunt and uncle's bedroom, and the baby's room, and she said there was always a baby. And then the other room was pretty much, the kids' bedroom, the living room, had the, like you see in the movies, the fireplace with the kettle on it and all of that. And we're talking, right after World War II.
Yeah, well.
No bathroom, no indoor plumbing.
Yeah, I remember my grandfather had a story actually once where he was in Italy, and he said that they were about to eat dinner, and it was a hot sort of muggy day, and there was all these flies on the dinner table, and then one of his uncles or whatever just swept all the flies off and then put down the food, and he was I remember that so vividly. I was like, wow.
Yeah, I know you could picture that. But as I was going through those records, I was so excited. I think going back to I don't know, late 1800, late 1700s or something. I found somebody who he wasn't a farmer. He was like a forest ranger or something like that. And I was like, oh, finally, somebody did something different.
Interesting. Wow.
Now, I think and I've said it on a few different ones. My dad's family comes from a whole different place. My grandmother was from two noble families, and I could never figure out why she came, because she was from the background that she had, and I eventually came across a cousin who was researching her great-great-grandmother, I think it was, who was my great-grandfather's sister. And she had come over, which I knew, she had come over in 1905 with her husband. And my grandparents came in 1915. And what we kind of think, she said that her great-great-grandfather was like an entrepreneur of sorts, and that he had come to America and either started a shoe factory or a wallet factory or both, something with leather. So the only thing I could think of is that they sent for her, or they told them, come to America, we could use the help, or, we'll put, your husband could work in this shop or whatever.
Yeah.
And eventually my grandfather and his brother opened up a embroidery shop where they made bridal crowns and veils in New York City.
Interesting. Wow.
And the cool thing about it was my cousin Linda, she's a third or fourth cousin. Our families were so intertwined in the 20s, 30s, 40s, and 50s, but we didn't know. And when we started piecing this all together, and I started talking to my first cousin Paul, and how close the family was, and it was mainly because they were the only two Piramalos in America, my grandmother and her aunt.
Wow.
And still to this day, they're all over in Italy.
That's crazy. So they were the no other.
No, I see a few ship records with a couple of people visiting, and for me, when I was putting this together, it was so interesting because I had no idea I had any cousins there. And when I got, I went through Facebook and just started Piramalo, because Piramalo is not a common Italian name. It's originally from Spain, and the only people who have that name are people that come from this Count Giacomo. As we started exchanging pictures and artifacts and things like that, they didn't know that they had an American cousin.
That's cool. Those are amazing when you make those connections, and you sort of those are great. Wow.
Yeah. So I've been able to get a lot of background on the family through them, and found out there's still houses there. And we were supposed to go last April. Fingers crossed, we're going to go in September and actually meet.
Is there any festivals in the town there? Because I know sometimes, going into September, October, they have some festivals.
I think there may be. I mean, they're mainly from Naples. One thing that I did learn was the Southern Italian nobility, they all lived in Naples. They had their farms or whatever in various parts of Italy, but they didn't live there.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
They lived in Naples, and they would go visit once or twice a year, collect the taxes or collect the olive oil, whatever they collected. But they lived in Naples, and they all lived, basically together. So there's a lot of stuff in Naples centered around that, and I'm working with somebody from Letizia Sinisi from Italy Rooting, and what she does is she puts together a ancestor tour that brings you back in time. So she won't tell me what she's going to show me, but she says she has some amazing surprises. So
she does a bunch of research on your family history, and then like finds different areas where you guys can go to. That's so cool.
Yeah, and some things I pointed out to her. She's been talking to one of my cousins over there about where to go. But you mentioned Avelino. My ninth grade, well, several of them, but the first Prince of Avelino was my ninth great grandfather, and he was Marino Caracciolo. And he owned, I just found this out recently, he owned much of what is Campania today.
Wow, so you're royalty. That's in a way.
Nobility, not royalty. We're not related to the kings. At least not recent. Way back, yes, but not recent.
Yeah, that's crazy. It's fun to like find those things out. I kind of found out, you mentioned something about how like everybody was intertwined, but we didn't even know it. And I had a lot of stories that I found out where it was sort of a similar situation. Like my Uncle Rudy, who's actually the husband of my third cousin Louisa, who's cousin of my grandfather, but we just call him Uncle Rudy.
Of course. Well, that's
yeah, exactly. He had a similar situation. Like he had no reason to come to America because his family was well off in the town they were in, but he decided to come, I think, just because he felt like he wasn't going anywhere, or he was too much of a bum in Italy because like his family was just wealthy, and so he came to America, and he got really sick, and it was kind of interesting because this was before he met Louisa, before knew other people were in America, and then he was in this hospital in Jersey, and my great grandmother actually came to him and like fed him and took care of him as that was happening. And then it was just funny, like she came because she knew that he was from San Potito, and so then he was eternally grateful for that. And then eventually met Louisa, who's related to my great grandmother, and so it was like funny how like people were. I just like almost like in a film I played in my head where I'm like people meeting people that will like be there for the rest of their life, but they don't even know it in those moments. And it's just kind of like, it's really cool to find out, and it kind of gives me like, it makes me analyze what I'm doing in my life a little bit and sort of see like, try to see a comparison, or
Yeah, and it's so interesting to me to find out what some of these people were like, and just, we were in Italy once, and I don't know, for me when I went there, it was like going home. You know what I mean? You probably had the same feeling.
Yeah, it was nice. It was funny actually because there's a moment where somebody was like, I had a camera crew with me, and they were like trying to get the camera crew, and they kept saying like, don't worry about him, like he's Italian, and I felt like I was slightly insulted, but then like, oh, they're not gonna let me try the new thing, but like the new food or whatever. But I was like, I felt really good that like they're accepting me almost like I'm home in this town, so that was nice.
So that's a good segue. So let's talk about the film that you made, and I think I think I'm right. You also have another project going. Is that right?
Yeah, mainly. As of right now, it's been mainly the documentary because it becomes all-consuming, I guess, when you start. But I'll talk about that first. So I started this documentary 3 years ago, and it started me not wanting to make a documentary, but it was me filming my family, like interviews of my grandmother, and just recordings of her talking, and my grandfather, etc. And it eventually became this film where I realized that there was my family who came to America, and then there was a family that was left behind in Italy or decided never to come. And there was a story there, so I filmed my family for a year, just the inner workings of my family, everything that we do, different, Christmas, Easter, Thanksgiving, came on some other weekends as well, interviewed some cousins, and then eventually went to Italy. And I was concerned, like I wanted to re-meet my cousins and everything and get footage of them, but I was more concerned with like, is there anything left in that town that my father kept having, like telling me all these things, like I discovered this about the town, I learned this about the town, and I wondered like, is there anything left? And I went there and we discovered some new people, new things that I didn't know, and that's sort of the documentary is sort of showing you the inner workings of an Italian American family today, at least mine, and then in Italy, this journey to Italy to discover this family that I never knew existed, which is what we discovered, a new family. So that was cool.
Yeah, no, definitely. And, interesting is because we, especially, my generation who grew up basically surrounded by Italians. I mean, we from Corona, Queens, and everybody on the block had an Italian last name, and everything revolved around food and all of that. It's not quite the same as it was back then. But, there's this thing about Italian Americans who we consider ourselves Italian, which of course we're not. We're Americans. So what did you discover about Italian Americans and Italians, whether it be different or similar?
Well, there was a lot of little things in the beginning. I think like after filming my family for a year, and I noticed, like you said, like we call ourselves Italians, but we're Americans. As I'm watching back the footage and just like as we're filming, I realized, wow, a lot of these things like aren't that Italian at all. But like we have this way about us, like to like make it an Italian thing. I don't know like how to describe it, but like one scene, my mom was making pancakes, and she was like, "These are the best Italian pancakes." I'm like, Italians don't make pancakes, like like then. I went to Italy and they're not making pancakes, but just the way about her like being so proud of like being Italian. So I realized that about Americans, and then in Italy I noticed that in terms of like a similarity, there still is these like core tenets of like family life that I don't know if it applies to everybody, but like for Italians and Italian Americans, there's just like things. Hidden barriers like people won't cross with their families, or like different traditions with their families that they keep. And then obviously there's some foods that actually I was told weren't in Italy that were similar. Like they actually in my town they have meat. Like people kept telling me like meatballs are an Italian American thing, which is probably true. But I went there and they were like, I forget what it was called, like polpetta, I think it's. Yeah. And I was like, well, oh, I'm excited for this. And then it was a meatball, and I was like, it's like we discovered they actually have meatballs in Italy. So, yeah, so that, and in terms of major differences, I think that actually another similarity is that the young people of sort of like Italian Americans and then Italians in Italy are at this like, I noticed we're all kind of at this crossroad of, do we want to sort of pay as much attention to our heritage as like the generations before us? Because a lot of Italians they were just like focused on just having fun, living their life. They didn't really like notice. Like I told them like I want to go and see the documents of like my family, and they were like, why would you ever care about these documents ever? Like it just doesn't make any sense to us. And I kept getting that answer a lot where they were just like, it doesn't make any sense that you want to learn all your history. And then in America, when I'm like, my siblings are like, why are you doing this whole film? Like, it doesn't make any sense. Like, we hear all these stories from Dad, and that's what they are, stories. And I noticed that like different crossroads. We're like at some sort of crossroads, and like I think maybe an attempt with the film was sort of to like show the value in sort of learning your family history and sort of understanding all that and realizing that actually Italians and Italian Americans, even though we're so far removed, there's all these things that we still hold special and are similar, and especially with our family and our religion, and that's important. It's good to know because it helps you in your life, sort of coming of age, and like how you want to, what you want to do with your life.
Yeah, and I found similar kinds of things where Italians don't do DNA testing, for example.
Yeah,
it's not done. And I kind of think I said, to your point, I think it's kind of like, well, great grandma and great great grandma and great great grandpa are all, buried in the cemetery down the road, and I don't need to know all of this stuff. And I even, did a test with a company based in Europe, thinking, well, maybe if it's based in Europe, there'd be a lot more Italians. There isn't. Certainly not like in America. The interesting thing I find about that is some people, when they do the DNA test and find out, how could I not be 100% Italian when all my grandparents came from Italy? How does French get in there, or does Greek get in there, or does Jewish get in there? And I try to explain to them, and Italian's hothead, right? I try to explain to them that's got nothing to do with your culture. Your culture is your culture. Your DNA, Italy, it was conquered by everybody.
Yeah, no, it's true. And it's funny, I did an ancestry as well, and I found that I had some Greek in me, and it was like, it was a pretty good percent of Greek. And my friend gets a hold of me. He's like, he's got a bit of like a city accent. He's like, "You're Greek. Like, you can't make this film. You're Greek." He's like, "You may go back to Greece and learn about that." I was like, "Oh my god." He's like, "You can't let this information get out." But you're right. Italians were conquered by everybody, and also maybe my dad kept thinking like, "Oh, maybe it's like Roman Empire or something." But yeah, I think it's funny, like Americans. At least like with Italian Americans, like we're so obsessed with like going back to Italy and like understanding who we are. And I think a lot of Americans, since we're sort of a nation of immigrants, like are interested in that. At least like once you get to the second, third generation. But Italians were like so focused on getting out of Italy. And actually, when I was there, I realized that in a lot of the southern regions, it's almost a similar issue that they had in the 20s when everybody left. Initially, there's no jobs. Some people are overeducated. They have a lot of just like these major issues, and so a lot of them are just moving out, if not to America, to like Germany, UK. A lot of Italians are going to UK, at least from what they were telling me. And it's just funny, like we want to get into Italy and they want to get out, so they kept saying, "Let's switch places. Like, I'll go to America and then you stay here."
I keep telling Letizia, I said, you got to have the Italian government make it easier for us to get citizenship. Not that it's hard, it just takes a long time, for as long as you have the paperwork. But, I've thought about it a few times, and, I did find somebody who said if you go there and stay there for 6 to 8 weeks, you could do it a lot quicker. Once you have the paperwork all in order, I guess they grease a few palms and take care of things that way. So the documentary is about the family. So correct me if I'm wrong. You have a new project now going, right?
I do. The main project has been the documentary. I also have a series that I'm writing, which is also sort of about Italians, but. That's more concerned about, I think, like the church and the role it plays in the families, like a Catholic church. But that one's a little bit under wraps, so I don't know. I don't know if I want to go fully into the story because I don't have all the details. But
well, when you're ready, we'll come back. We'll do another one. We'll talk about that.
Definitely, yeah. But maybe it's been the documentary, and it's evolved over the years, sort of like how it's like what it's become. Originally, I was just filming because why not? Might as well have the memories of my grandparents' stories, and then eventually it became this like whole production where I'm like I have a whole camera crew in my house, and I'm like trying to convince my family to just like don't worry about the cameras, like just keep doing Christmas dinner and keep doing Christmas dinner or Easter dinner, and it's been a bit of a journey, but I think like when it comes out, people will be really interested, because the way it's sort of structured is that, like, I don't know if you have this, but I think like in every Italian American family, there's all these little like really funny inside jokes about the way that we're acting and all these things, and like the documentary's goal is to sort of let everybody in on some of these inside jokes that at least in my family we have, and I think that just like you'll grow an appreciation of how these families operate, and hopefully maybe do some research of your own. Maybe you can learn about your own past, people who are watching. So
yeah, and that's great to have. I mean, a couple of things that we have that just turned out to be great was that my cousin Joe interviewed my uncle in Barres before he passed away, and got the whole inside story about living in Italy in the 50s, 20s, 30s, 40s, and 50s, etc. And we also lucky to have some home movies from the late 40s and early 50s. Silent, of course, but I actually have my parents' wedding, or at least a little chunk of it, that was filmed. So not everybody from that era has that, so it's really great to have.
Yeah.
And you have the big, the picture with, the wedding picture, but everybody in the picture is friggin' family, and there's like 50 people. Everybody's related.
That's the funny thing. My parents had a wedding like that. Like since my dad got real traditional with it, they had like a huge Italian wedding. I remember seeing the pictures, and it was like my mom's from Philly, so they also had like a block party and everything, and it was crazy the way they explained it. I was like, I don't think I'm gonna go for that one, but that's cool that you did that.
Well, my parents got married in 1944, so just towards the end of the war, and there wasn't, and they didn't have all lots of money, but they had the football wedding with the sandwiches and all of that kind of stuff, and interestingly enough, certain things that you couldn't get, and I didn't know this till later on in life, when we were growing up in the 50s, and all the ornaments were on the tree, they were all different. They were also vastly different. And I probably asked my mother one day, how come none of these things match? And she said, you couldn't get glass. She said, everybody in the family gave us one or two ornaments to put on our Christmas tree.
Wow.
Because it wasn't, it was the end of the war, and I guess all the glass production or everything else was going into the war effort. So just to and even things like dishes and things like that. Some mismatched things because they had to just get stuff. But I do have my mother's silverware set from the movie theater. Every time you went to the movies, you got a piece of silverware.
Oh, so she has the whole set.
Yeah, that's how they built the silverware set. Well, this has been great. I love talking to you about this. We'll have to keep in touch and make sure that when everything's wrapped, we get it out there for people to see.
Definitely, yeah. No, I'm. I guess. I mean, we're on Facebook and Instagram, so we'll be doing updates too for the film. The title is Blood Acqua. So people tell me like, oh, you should have done like blood in the Italian like sangue or whatever. And I was like, it doesn't sound as cool for some reason. So,
well, when I first saw that, I thought the exact same thing. I said, wait a second, this is like, but then, and I don't know if you did this intentionally or not, but then I said to myself, oh, well, this makes sense because it's, Italy, America. So it almost makes sense to have the two different languages.
Exactly. So that was exactly what I was going for. I'm glad you noticed that, because my dad, it's funny, like my dad, since he's obsessed with like the same things I am. He's like taking on this role as like a second producer. So like he's like he'll call me up and he's like, "Listen, Dante, I was thinking, you should include this in the film because just think about all the impacts of this." And I'm like, "Yeah, Dad, I will, I will." But so he gets excited. But yeah, Blood Acqua. We have a website and Instagram, Facebook, as you know, and we'll keep you updated. It should be. It's getting closer. I mean, we're sort of in post-production phase, and it's getting very close to sort of getting there. So I'll keep you updated.
Yeah, great. And send me all the links, and so I can include it in the blog and all of that. So.
I'll find a couple screenshots maybe from the.
Yeah, for sure. All right. Well, thanks again.
Thank you.